This video will show you how to replace the valve cover on a Ford Edge with a 3.5 liter engine. You'll have two of these, one on either side of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Now just a quick note about this, we want to confirm we're replacing the proper valve cover. The valve cover towards the front of your engine compartment will have an oil fill port. The valve cover that I'm going to show you how to replace is the one that's located under your plastic intake. Now the first thing we want to do is make our way along the driver's side of the engine compartment. This is where we can see our vehicle's battery. As we make our way along the rearward side of this is where we can see our negative battery terminal. Let's use a 10mm to loosen the hardware just enough that we can remove the terminal end from the battery post. We'll set that aside. Now after that, we're going to start removing our air inlet tube. Looking along the battery side of the air inlet tube, we can see that we do have a vent tube in this area. So I'm just going to take hold of the entire thing and I'm going to carefully pull it out and away. Once I have that dislodged, of course, a quick inspection. This looks good. We're going to start loosening our clamp that holds the inlet tube to our upper air filter housing. You can use an 8mm or a flathead screwdriver. Loosen the clamp enough that we can start sliding this out of place. Now towards the engine side of this tube, we can see that we do have a breather tube that leads down to our front valve cover. We're going to start dislodging this. There's a locking tab. I'm pulling that forward, sliding it away, and then you should be able to dislodge that tube. Now as we start looking along the battery side of the inlet tube, making our way underneath where the master cylinder reservoir is, we can see our next clamp holding this in place. Just use your 8mm to loosen this clamp so we can slide this out of position. Just a quick inspection of this and we'll set it aside. After removing that, we're paying attention to our throttle body. One thing that I would note about this is you never want to press on the butterfly valve inside of the throttle body. That can cause calibration issues. We'll start with the electrical connector. This has a red locking tab. You're going to have to gently lift this up just enough that you can squeeze in on the black tab underneath it, and then we should be able to lift this up and out of position. After that, just a quick inspection for corrosion. Just going to use a flat blade screwdriver. You can also use a small angled pick if necessary. This looks good. Let's set that wiring aside for now. If you were looking just underneath the throttle body, you're going to find that you have an 8mm headed mounting bolt holding the throttle body assembly down to a bracket. Let's go ahead and remove that mounting bolt. Loose enough I can start removing it by hand. Just a quick inspection of that. As we make our way up along the top of the throttle body, we have an evap tube. You can see that we have a yellow lock on this connector. For this, I'm going to be using a small angled pick. As far as this angled pick, I'm going to try to make my way along the back side. Now, if you're looking at this yellow locking tab, it actually has two locking ears. The locking ears are on the back side here, which is why I'm using a small angled pick. I'm just trying to grab onto my locking ear, and as you can tell, it starts pulling away. Now, of course, I do need to make my way along the next locking ear as well. For that, we can just pivot this as necessary. See if we can make our way under with a small screwdriver. Now that we have that broken free, I'm going to fully remove that yellow locking tab. Let's pull this out of place. Now there's going to be two hoses up along the top rear of the intake that we need to gain access to. To easily gain access, I'm going to dislodge this valve. You're going to find that you have an electrical connector. The electrical connector has a locking tab up along the top. We're just squeezing that in and disconnecting it. No corrosion there. We'll set it aside. Continuing on, as far as the valve is concerned, we're going to dislodge that from its bracket. Looking along the side, you can see that there is one locking tab. We're just gently tugging on that in one direction or the other, and this should slide out of position. There we are. Just work that off of there. We can see the locking tab. That's still in good usable order, so we're going to set this aside. So now with that out of the way, as we make our way past where the throttle body is, we can see one of our hoses. This has a squeezable clamp. We're going to squeeze the clamp and slide the hose out of position towards the driver's side. Just using an angled hose pick, Slide that right off of there. A quick inspection of the hose. Still soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. We'll set that aside. As we make our way towards our next hose, we're going to continue on by dislodging this wire first. We have a mounting point right here. Let's go ahead and pull that away from its mounting stud. That looks good. As we make our way up to this electrical connector, you have a locking tab up along the top. This locking tab will pivot forward towards the front of the engine compartment, and then we can dislodge the electrical connector. Just going to use an angled pick. No corrosion there. Set that aside. At this point, we can see the hose all the way back here. This has a squeezable clamp, just as the other hose did, along the other side of the intake. Let's go ahead and squeeze that clamp, and we'll slide this out of position. All right, I can take hold of this, slide it off of there by hand. Now let's make our way along the front of the intake. Along the front area, you're going to find that you have 3 mounting tabs, holding our wiring harness and coolant tube in place to the plastic intake. We're going to carefully separate these 3 areas. There we are. So as you start making your way along the front driver's side corner of this, you're going to find that we have an electrical wiring harness that goes across the corner. We have to dislodge this area as well. Just have one locking tab under there. Let's make sure that we cover the throttle body and the port leading into our upper air filter housing. As I mentioned with the throttle body, do not press on the butterfly valve. I'm only lightly pressing this in here. I'm not pressing on that butterfly valve. This is just going to protect our air filter on the opposite side of this. And now we can use some compressed air. Now we have 6 bolts holding the upper plastic intake to the lower intake. You're going to find that you have 2 along the center and 2 along each edge. For the removal, we're starting on the outer edges and then we'll finish in the center. As you can tell, the last mounting bolt is considerably longer than all others. Now we can take hold of that plastic intake and lift it up and out of position. Now as we continue on, we need to make sure nothing falls inside of the intake leading into the engine. We're going to clean this area during the installation process. For now, let's just go ahead and protect it. I'm putting a cover over the top. Obviously, you can secure this any way you deem fit, as long as nothing will make its way into the engine. Now that we have that area covered, we're moving towards where our valve cover is. Now there is a small breather hose on here. I'm just going to go ahead and take hold of that and pull it out of place, just so it doesn't fall off while we continue on. Set that aside. We're going to start removing each one of our 3 ignition coils from the area. Each one of these will have an electrical connector, and the electrical connector has a red locking tab. I'm using a small pocket screwdriver to pull that locking tab away, and then you can squeeze on the other tab that you can see just under that, and you should be able to dislodge this. If you find you have a hard time squeezing, you can use a small pocket screwdriver on the forward side closest to that ignition coil. No corrosion there. Let's set that aside. We'll use an 8mm to remove the mounting hardware for our ignition coil. Remove the ignition coil from the valve cover. If you find it stuck in place, we can carefully attempt to pry. We want to be very careful not to cause any damage. A close inspection of our ignition coil as we continue on. One thing I would note about these is you typically want to make sure you reinstall them in the same placement as where you had removed them from. We'll set this aside. Same process for all others. Now we want to start dislodging our wiring harness. This wiring harness makes its way across the valve cover down along the rearward side here. Now typically you're going to find that there's a blue connector attached to a plastic bracket. We need to separate the connector from the plastic bracket. Ours looks as though it's broken, but typically you would just carefully use a small pocket screwdriver to slide this out of place. So now as far as the locking tab, if you were looking down in this area, this is approximately where you should be able to see it. You just want to make your way in, gently pry, and then like I said, this should want to separate. You can do that from either side. Since our plastic bracket is broken, I'm just going to disconnect my blue connector here, and we're going to let that hang aside. So this is where our VVT solenoid electrical connector is. I'm squeezing in on the locking tab, and I'm going to attempt to pull this out of place. There we go. There's that electrical connector. I don't see any corrosion on either side there. Now, while I am in this corner, my application has this small wire leading along the side of the valve cover. I'm just going to dislodge that. It looks as though it's held in place with a broken wire tie. Just pull that right up and out of place. Just slide it off to the side. We don't want to cause any damage to that. Now, as we make our way along the front of the valve cover, we're going to start dislodging our wiring harness coming across this area. We have a black electrical connector. The locking tab's along the bottom, so I'm going to compress that in, pull that out of place. No corrosion there. This is looking good. I like to disconnect each one of my fuel injectors along this area. We have locking tabs on the passenger side of each one of these connectors. Let's go ahead and squeeze that in and pull it up and out of place. Now I'm continuing on with a plastic trim tool. We're going to start dislodging the wiring harness from its mounting points, making its way across. Looking at this one on my application, it's already damaged, but you would still make your way underneath here and just gently pry that up and out of place. That should be attached to the wiring harness. This next one's going to be a little different. There's that. Last one over in the corner here. Okay. So now we can take that wiring harness, we're bringing it over towards the driver's side. You're going to find that the wiring harness continues on along the driver's side of the rearward valve cover towards the center. We can see that we have a mounting point along the back side of the valve cover here. I'm just using my trim tool just as I was before. Okay. Now as we continue over towards the center, we're going to find that we have another mounting point. This one's going to look like the one that we had removed from the front. Now we have another one moving towards the center. We'll lift this up and out of place as well. Connector out of there. There we are. Now let's disconnect our Bank 1 Sensor 1 O2 sensor leading to our exhaust along the back side there. No corrosion. We should be able to take this wiring harness and we're going to set it aside. Now up along the front passenger side of our valve cover, we're going to have two wiring harnesses. We have the large wiring harness and then we have a second wire just underneath it. It's held in place. Let's go ahead and dislodge that. There's one. We'll make our way under here. We've got the next one. Perfect. We want to make sure we have plenty of room along this valve cover so we can remove the mounting hardware and lift this up and out of position. Now, as you remember, during the removal process of our wiring harness, there's two areas that had plastic tabs leading into the same area that may look like it had a mounting bolt. So just take note of these areas on the valve cover. With that said, as we start removing the hardware, let's start with the outer edges first. I'm using a 10mm for each piece of hardware. There we are. There's that one. Back one. Next two pieces of hardware. There's that next one. Now we have two more pieces of hardware along the center area. Now, if you look towards where the VVT solenoid is, you're going to find that you have a hidden piece of hardware right in this area where I had my wiring harness going through. So I'm just going to dislodge this plastic tab. and then I'll continue on with the hardware located under it. Now at this point, we can start lifting the valve cover up and out of position. You may find that it feels as though it's stuck, and you may have to gently pry. Now I'm using a small pry bar. I'm going up against this fuel rail here and prying up on the valve cover. I want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the fuel rail. We just need an area to apply some leverage. So as I'm lifting this up along the driver's side, I can see that I do still have the seal along where my VVT solenoid is on the passenger side, and this is holding it in place. If you can't pull it up, you could gently pry. Just be extremely careful not to cause any damage. Now up along the top of our valve cover, this small plastic area is actually our PCV valve. We're going to take hold of it with some pliers and we're going to turn it counterclockwise until it stops. After that, we'll lift it up and out of position. There we are. As you look at this, you can see exactly why we had to twist it to remove it. We have the small groove for the valve cover to sit into. Just a quick inspection of this. We'll set it aside. And there it is, friend. The next thing I'm going to do is take a clean rag with some parts cleaner. We're going to wipe down the mounting area along the engine where the valve cover and gasket will sit. As we start wiping this down, we're attempting to wipe away from the engine. In case there's any miscellaneous debris, once again, we do not want anything making its way into the engine. This can cause engine damage. Along the passenger side of this engine, there is two areas that we are going to have to focus on after this. This is where the timing chain cover would be. Now that I have that wiped down, now as I mentioned along the passenger side of the engine here, we have two areas that you can see some gasket maker. This is along where the timing chain cover meets to the engine. Use a razor blade to remove it. After scraping it off, we'll just confirm that there's no oily residue. Continue on to the front after that. Now obviously as I clean the front, it's probable that any debris is going to fall inward, so I'm just going to protect this area. Everything's looking good here. Wiping away from the inside of the engine. No oily residue. Let's prepare our brand new valve cover for installation. We're starting with our mounting hardware. Now, if you were to look at your mounting hardware, you're going to find that most of the pieces of hardware have a threaded stud along the top. One piece will not. Now, as we go to install this, we want to make sure that we lubricate each one of our rubber seals using some silicone paste. Once you've lubricated the rubber seals, we're going to start with the one bolt that does not have the stud. That's going to go on this area here of the valve cover. This would essentially be on the rearward side of the valve cover along the back side of the engine. Now I've already lubricated all other rubber seals, so I'll just go ahead and continue on sliding these into place along the way. Now all pieces of hardware are installed. Let's turn this over on the bench. Now let's apply some silicone paste to each one of our ports. We have our spark plug tube ports, and then we also have our VVT solenoid port. Now it's time to install our valve cover gasket. To help with placement of this, we're looking for the two notches that you can see. As far as those notches, they would be on the timing chain cover side of the valve cover. So with that said, let's attempt to get this in position. See exactly where that needs to sit. Everything else should align along the way. I'm only gently pressing this in until I've confirmed everything does seat properly. I'm only gently pressing this in until I confirm everything aligns properly. Now, as you can tell, it does look as though it's aligned properly. I have each one of my notches on the proper side of the valve cover. Let's continue on, fully pressing this into the valve cover, and we'll make our way back over to the engine. We need to double check to make sure this is seated and it's not hanging out or inward in any way, in which case it's not going to seal and it could potentially cause damage. Before we install the valve cover onto the engine, the two areas along where the timing chain cover and the engine meet, we need to apply some gasket maker. There's one. We'll do the same for the front. With all the mounting hardware installed, the next thing we're going to do is our PCV valve directly in the center port here. Now we're going to take our PCV valve, we're lining this up, we're twisting it clockwise until it feels like it wants to set into place. Once you feel as though it's bottomed out by hand, we're using some pliers to confirm it's properly secured. We don't want to leave this loose. Now you're going to find it only goes so far, and then it stops. Now at this point, we can get this in the vehicle. Now we can get our valve cover in place. We're going to carefully bring this up and over the top. We need to bring it over our VVT solenoid and each one of our spark plug tubes. I'm bringing this down. Let's make sure we push this down as far as possible, confirming that the seal is seated over our VVT solenoid properly. We have to make sure the valve cover is properly seated all the way across. And we'll continue on lightly snugging each one of our mounting bolts. When we do this, we're doing it in a specific order. Just want to make sure I start each of these in by hand. Just want to be sure we're not cross-threading them into the wrong positioning. Now when we go to lightly bottom these out and torque them, we're going to do it in a specific sequence. You can follow the sequence on the screen. Final mounting bolt all the way back here. Once you have them lightly bottomed out, we're going to torque each of these to 89 inch-pounds in that same sequence. Now I've gone around once, I'm going to go around a second time just to confirm everything's properly seated. Same sequence here. Let's start paying attention to our wiring harness. I'm going to start with the area that goes along the back side of the valve cover. As we start bringing this into position, we do have some mounting points. We have this area here, which will press down into the valve cover, and then we also have the next mounting point right along here, which goes onto this stud here. Just double check, make sure that's secured. We'll continue on to the next. Now we'll move along to our upstream O2 sensor electrical connector. Of course, we're going to make sure we align our locking tab area. We'll press the two together and listen for an audible click. Double check, make sure it's secure. Now, as we start making our way along the driver's side of the valve cover heading towards the front, there should be a mounting point along this side that would press into the valve cover right here. Our hardware is broken, so I'm using a wire tie. Let's make our way towards the front. Start bringing this all the way across. We're going to start securing this. Press that into the valve cover here. Make our way across. Just make sure that's over there. Let's continue on securing this along the way. Audible click from that. Now, during the removal process, you remember that I had told you that there's supposed to be a plastic bracket back here, and this connector would typically slide off of there. On our application, as you already know, it's broken. Typically, you would just slide the blue connector down onto this plastic bracket. Once you've done that, you're going to continue on with the blue connector. For that connector, you know what to do. Just go ahead and line it up, press it in. With the wiring harness in the proper positioning, we're continuing on with our ignition coils. Along the bottom of each one of our ignition coils, where it slides over our spark plug, apply some silicone paste. We're going to take this and we're sliding it down into position here. We need to press it onto the spark plug. Continuing on, we're aligning our mounting bolt port. We're going to start that in and snug it up. We'll start in our mounting bolts for this, snug it up. The torque for this is 89 inch-pounds. We'll connect our electrical connector. Once you have this pressed in, you need to confirm that you lock it in with the red locking tab afterward. So we're just pressing in on the connector. We have an audible click. It feels secure. Lock it down, double check. Go ahead and repeat the process for all other ignition coils. Let's get that PCV vent tube on there. Now we're moving towards where our injectors are. Let's start with this small electrical connector. We're going to press this together. That's secure. Connect in each one of your injectors. The locking tab faces towards the passenger side of the vehicle. Passenger side front corner here. Get our small wiring harness in place, the larger wiring harness. One last quick inspection in this area, and we can start removing the covering from along the lower intake. As we remove this, we want to make sure that nothing falls inside of the engine. This is extremely important. You may need to use a flat razor blade. If you do have to scrape, make sure you scrape out and away from your engine. We're not trying to scrape into any of these ports. Now I'll be using a clean rag. I've sprayed some parts cleaner directly on it. We don't need to spray into the engine. Before we start resting the upper plastic intake on top of the lower intake, we're looking along the bottom. This is where we will have some seals. If you're not planning on replacing these, you at least need to make sure you clean them down and double check to make sure they're not damaged in any way. If it feels like they're hardened or cracked in any way, you're just going to want to replace them. When I wipe the seal down, I'm only using a clean rag. I don't want to use any type of detergent. You may find that you have some oil in this area, and that's fine. Double checking that seal. Let's rest this in place. Before you start installing any of your hardware, double check to make sure that you're properly seated. You may find that it might be a little off kilter, in which case you may cause damage. Now that I have this in place, I'm continuing on with my hardware. When installing your mounting bolt, you remember that we had one bolt that was longer than all others. The longer bolt is going to go in through this port here. We're just bringing this down and through, and we're going to start it in by hand, but we are not tightening any of our hardware until every piece is started in. Once we have each piece started in and snugged, we're going to torque all of them to 89 inch-pounds, and this is all going to be done in a specific order. That was our longer bolt, so we're on to all other shorter mounting bolts now. Now they're all started in by hand. We're going to be snugging and torquing these in that specific sequence, so let's get started with that. We're going to start down here for our first mounting bolt. Making our way towards a larger bolt here. Back side of the passenger corner here. Moving on to the front on the passenger side. Front over on the driver's side here. This one's tucked in behind our wiring harness. And now to the rear. 89 inch-pounds in that same sequence. For good measure, let's go around a second time, same sequence. Now we're going to start securing this area as well. You're going to find that there's a mounting point along the bottom. You're just aligning it with the plastic intake and pressing it down. We'll continue down the line once you have everything lined up. Double check, make sure that's secured. Let's make our way along the back side. We have a couple of hoses there. Now as we start reaching along the back, we have the hose that was coming off of our PCV valve on the valve cover. Line it up, press it up against the intake here. Now as you can tell, I'm not completely pressed on. We need to continue on until it's completely bottomed out. Continuing on, we're going to squeeze the clamp and we'll attempt to slide it into the same positioning as where we had removed it from. Now I'm trying to pull that off of the intake. It should not slide out of place. We'll continue on to the next hose as we move towards the driver's side. Let's continue on with reconnecting our throttle body electrical connector. Red locking tab facing towards the center of the engine. Pressing it down. Audible click. Lock it in with the red locking tab. So now we're going to take our power wire and we're coming all the way over here. As we start pressing this in, we need to make sure that our white locking tab starts pressing towards that firewall. Okay, pulls right in. Double check, make sure that's secured. We'll secure the wiring harness to its mounting point. Now let's start looking at our valve here. Before we start securing it into its mounting bracket, let's continue on with the line first. Now one thing I want to mention about this is we still have to reinstall our yellow locking tab. If you are looking at the yellow locking tab, you can tell that I have an area that protrudes out. It's facing towards the battery. If you're looking at the connector, you can see exactly which way this needs to go. Let's go ahead and slide this onto the plastic intake just behind the throttle body. After that, we'll get our yellow locking tab in place as well. Pressing this on here. Now I have this aligned, so I'm just going to continue on locking it in. We'll double check to make sure that's secured. Typically it can move around, but it should not be able to slide out of place. Now let's continue on securing the valve. As we start looking at this, along the back side, you can see our locking tab. The locking tab will have to fit into this slot. So we're going to slide this entire bracket over. We'll listen for our click, and we'll continue on with our electrical connector. Now I have my wiring harness, so I have my locking tab facing straight up. Press it in, audible click there. And I have my 8mm headed mounting bolt. We're going to start this in, we'll snug it up. Looking into the throttle body, we'll remove our protector. And then the same thing as far as the upper air filter housing. Double check to make sure there's no miscellaneous debris in either of these areas. We're going to install the inlet tube. When we go to do this, don't forget that we still have 2 tubes to attach to it. This one's the easiest to forget. Now, as far as the inlet tube, we need to make sure we have it in the proper orientation. One side will have a larger port here, which is for the forward side. It's going to plug right in here. Looking along the other side, we have a small porthole, and that's for the other tube. Press this onto the throttle body as far as possible, and we'll tighten our clamp. Now I've got my 8mm socket on here. I'm just double checking to make sure I'm completely on the throttle body, and now I'll snug it up. All the way over towards the air filter housing, we're going to align this area as well. Tighten our 8mm headed clamp. Double check, make sure that's secured. And now we can continue on to the hose along the back side here. Just go ahead and line that up. You're going to press it straight in. Double check to make sure that's secured in place. Let's continue on along the front. We'll just lift this up so we can gain access along the bottom. line up our tube. You're going to press it in. You should see this locking clip move. It's going to go around it. And then, of course, we're going to try to slide this out of place. It is locked in. Now it's time for the negative battery terminal. We're going to take this, press it onto the battery post as far as possible, and we'll tighten our 10mm piece of hardware. Double check, make sure that's secured in place. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. The next thing that we would recommend would be to complete an engine oil filter and engine oil change. After you've completed that, just go ahead and double check for leaks. You're going to run the vehicle. Make sure you have no check engine light and no running condition, and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.